we're living in tough times, and no, there are no words or symbols that will adequately describe it. For some people in the pandemic, in some places it's just complete tragedy, trying to survive, trying to live, trying to feed family. But for most of us in the world, it's also disturbing, and it's subtle too. It's like we try and live normal lives, but there's something really destabilising about COVID. There's the immediate fear, the legitimate fear about becoming ill, but there's what it's done to us as human beings. That is, up until the virus, we coped in a certain way. We had this notion, this comforting notion of the normal, with routines and people and places that made up the normal. But somehow that's all been shifted, jolted, and we know that the normal has gone. It's over, but we long for some sense of routine, of certainty, of surety in all this. So it's very hard for any of us to escape this kind of collective madness or dis-ease about what is taking place. And I guess I want to explore that because I think there are some important elements in this. And the three elements I want to explore is the part of this jarring shift, this new era that we live in, evokes a great sense of grief. There are things that we have lost that need to be named, but also, and this is the unexpected thing, there are also elements of grace, small but important elements of grace or hope that are present, and because of that, it can give us a new perspective to cope with the here and now. So in order to explore this experience that we're having, I want us to take up an ancient metaphor or trope, and it's the metaphor of the wilderness. Because in some ways what's happened with the pandemic is the so-called normal has gone. And it's not only disturbing, but there's great grief about losing that. And it is like we are now on a new journey, new segment of our shared existence. And it's like a journey in the wilderness, and we're not sure of where we're going or what the outcome will be. So let's explore then the whole pandemic experience as a wilderness experience. And I want to pick up two ancient images of the wilderness. First from the Hebrew scriptures, and this is from the book of Exodus. And many of you will know the story. If you're not familiar with the story, it's what I'd describe as a dreamtime story. It's not an historical account. It's about the existential reflections of Jewish people about their origins and about the things that really matter. In the story, a group of Hebrew slaves are liberated, and then they begin this journey in a wilderness. And as the journey progresses, they start to grieve for the normal. At least in Egypt, they had routine. They were fed. They were looked after. But now that's all gone. And so there's this series of events that take place. Moses is leading them through the wilderness. And you'll note that all sorts of things take place. There's grumbling. In the Hebrew scriptures, it's often referred to as the murmuring. They are complaining about what has happened. There are elements of grief, deep grief. And of course, in the wilderness, it's important to name the things that we have lost, and to grieve deeply and fully, to respect what has been lost. There is a lack of confidence in leadership, in community. It's a very powerful story of the collective trauma on a community of people and all the emotions that it evokes. Now, the significant thing out of it is that it's in the experience of the wilderness that this wandering group of people, this motley crew, begin to discover two things. For a start, there's not a simple solution. It's not like everything is fixed up. But along the way, they discovered unexpected moments of grace. So in the Dreamtime story, it's the gift, the divine and gracious gift of the manna and the quail, or of water bursting from the rock, or of turning toxic water into fresh water. So they don't solve the problem of being lost in the wilderness, but they sustain the people and they make them a people. In other words, things aren't fixed up, but these small moments, unexpected moments of grace are nurturing, deeply nurturing, and give the people a sense of community and common purpose. Now, it's fascinating that in the Gospel stories, now we're in the Christian scriptures, as the ministry of Jesus unfolds, the writers of the Gospels look around for ways of, I think, capturing something about the humanity of Jesus, Jesus the human one. In the Gospels, Jesus, of course, is a great teacher and a great figure, but he's not sanitized. He's not made into someone who seeks glory or embodies glory. There's an earthiness about this Jesus, and the Gospel writers often use the metaphor or the trope of the wilderness as a way of showing something about the development and the humanity of Jesus. In other words, that for Jesus to enter into his ministry of teaching and preaching, of this promise of the love and the grace of God, of this new era of transformation, Jesus needs to go through a wilderness experience where he is sorely tested and pushed to the edge. And it's out of that experience of the wilderness that Jesus himself is renewed, and this certainly seems to be the case in the Gospels. He comes out with a clear sense of purpose. And if we take the example of the Gospel of Mark, the shortest Gospel, it's a very brief account of Jesus in the wilderness. And in that Gospel, then, he comes out of the experience and he moves towards the cross. He moves towards his destiny, which will be a powerful and violent destiny. So simply by coming out of the experience doesn't mean that his problems are solved, but instead he's had an experience of grace. He has been sustained. He now has a new sense of purpose in order to make that journey. So the metaphor or trope of the wilderness is ancient. It's very powerful. It presents life in all its nitty-gritty, but there are these important moments of grace that sustain people on the journey, give them a new sense of self and purpose, and often create and develop new bonds of friendship. They create a community to make the journey together. So with that in mind, let's return to the 21st century and the wilderness that we find ourselves in. And the three elements that I think are really important, that's grief, grace, and a new vision. It really is important that we name those things that we have lost. And each of us will do that in our own timing and in our own way. But part of that, it's great if we can find a way of externalizing it, of ritualizing. If we can say, I grieve for this. In some cases, it might be very dramatic. For some people, because of lockdowns, they could not get to a loved one's funeral. So there are some very profound losses that need to be named and honoured and ritualised. We often don't know how to go about it, but I think at least to name the fact that we've lost something and to be open to the possibility of finding a way to farewell, to honour what we have lost, is really a critical part of the journey in the wilderness, our 21st century wilderness. And the interesting thing too is if we find ourselves whinging or complaining or murmuring, that's good, because often a complaint or when we whinge, that's a sign of unresolved grief. And it's worth asking ourselves, what is it? Can I put my finger on it, what it is that I've lost? Usually in these times when we start to reflect upon what has taken place to us, we start to seek out or to find soulmates, people who can share the journey with us. And in this day and age, we have to be creative how we go about it. But one of the things that happens in the wilderness is we have new vision. We have a clarity about what is important. And who are the important people? Who are the people that we want to share the journey with? Now, I know it's a cliche, but I think this is a time where we do reach out. At the moment, everyone's reaching out. And perhaps the phrase is overdone, but the sentiment is good. This is the time to take initiatives to see if there are ways that we can care and support others. And in the context of those relationships, we will find unexpected moments of grace for ourselves. Often grace comes when we least expect it, but when we're taking a risk on ourselves or the things that are important. The final aspect is, while we continue to make the journey, this journey in the wilderness, as we name the things that we've lost, as we find travelling companions, as we find new moments of grace, excuse me, we often gain a new vision, a new vision about values, about what's important for us, not only in terms of relationships, but in terms of things that we aspire to. And so wonderful as various controversies arise around us, a whole range of things taking place, issues around racism and sexism. On the one hand, it's the last thing we feel like dealing with, but on the other hand, because we're in the wilderness, because we're learning to live in a new way with our humanity, our shared humanity, maybe this is the time to deal with the big issues because we know what's really important. So here we are together in the wilderness. It is not a walk in the park. We have good days and bad days. It can be very, very lonely, and at times we're not thinking straight. At times we know great anxiety, even depression. We're not sleeping well. All these are signs of the wilderness that we are in. And if we can somehow find a few companions on the way, if we can name those losses, we can discover together these life-giving moments of grace that will sustain us on the journey and give us a new sense of vision and new values for the way ahead. In the name of God, Creator, Redeemer and Sustainer. Amen.